Human blood spilled across the stars as the Rakari Empire's war fleets pierced Earth's skies. Mizar gripped the controls of his cloaked ship, racing toward the blue-green planet that held the key to his empire's survival. Intelligence reports claimed these primitive humans possessed technology that dwarfed the Rakari's own, a fact that both terrified and enticed the desperate emperor. Earth's exact location remained a fiercely guarded secret, whispered about in the shadowy halls of power. Rumors painted a grim picture of a dystopian regime, where the ruling elite hoarded advanced technology and left the masses to suffer in squalor. Mizar's mission was clear: infiltrate this mysterious world, uncover the source of their technological dominance, and secure it for the Rakari Empire. But as Mizar's ship breached Earth's atmosphere, alarms blared in warning. The humans had detected him. Before he could react, a blinding flash engulfed his ship. Searing pains shot through his body as the vessel plummeted toward the ground, trailing smoke and flames. Darkness claimed him, broken only by the sound of approaching footsteps. A grizzled human soldier loomed over Mizar, his eyes glinting with suspicion and curiosity. Sergeant Greg Hunter had seen his share of horrors, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of an alien spy crash-landing on his watch. As Mizar and Greg's paths intertwined, they found themselves drawn into a web of secrets and lies that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their realities. Earth's oppressive government, the Rakari Empire's desperation, and an ancient mystery linking humans to a long-forgotten alien race, the progenitors, collided in a dance of dystopian politics and hidden agendas. Unbeknownst to them, a powerful cabal of alien conspirators watched from the shadows, their fingers pulling the strings of the Galactic War. As Mizar and Greg raced to expose the truth, they knew that failure would mean not just the fall of Earth and the Rakari Empire, but the plunging of countless worlds into an eternal darkness from which there would be no escape. As the smoke cleared from the firefight, Greg and Mizar emerged from the hidden facility, clutching the alien artifacts. The partial progenitor message glowed faintly on the cracked screen of a salvaged datapad. Mizar's eyes narrowed as he studied the cryptic text, his mind racing with the implications of their discovery. "We need to find someone who can help us make sense of this," Greg said, his voice low and urgent. "And fast. Ryder and his goons won't be far behind." Mizar nodded, his grip tightening on the artifact in his hand. "I know someone who might be able to help. Dr. Arya Novak. She's a xenoarchaeologist who's been studying the progenitors for years." "Where do we find her?" Greg asked, scanning the surrounding area for signs of pursuit. "Last I heard, she was living in exile on a remote planet called Zephyr's Edge. She had to go into hiding to escape Earth's government." Mizar's expression darkened. They didn't like her poking around in the progenitor's secrets. The journey to Zephyr's Edge was tense and fraught with danger. Earth's forces scoured the galaxy for the fugitives, their advanced ships and technology making it nearly impossible to stay hidden for long. But Greg and Mizar were determined, driven by the knowledge that the fate of countless worlds rested on their shoulders. Dr. Novak's compound was a fortress of solitude, nestled deep in the craggy mountains of Zephyr's Edge. As Greg and Mizar approached, they were greeted by a pair of heavily armed sentries who eyed them with suspicion. "We need to see Dr. Novak," Greg said, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "It's urgent." The sentries exchanged a glance before nodding curtly and escorting them inside. Dr. Novak was waiting for them, her angular features etched with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "I've been expecting you," she said, her eyes flicking to the artifacts in their hands. "I've heard whispers of a great discovery on Earth, something that could change the course of the war." As Greg and Mizar explained their findings, Dr. Novak's expression grew more and more grave. She studied the partial message, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is incredible," she breathed. "The progenitors weren't just an ancient alien race. They were the architects of the galaxy itself, and this weapon they mention, it could be the key to everything." Over the next few days, Dr. Novak worked tirelessly to decipher the rest of the message. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. The progenitors had created a vast network of wormholes that connected the galaxies, and the weapon was a device that could control this network. But as they delved deeper into the mystery, They realized that they were not the only ones seeking the weapon. Colonel Ryder and his forces were closing in fast, determined to recover the stolen artifacts at any cost. As the walls closed in around them, Greg and Mizar knew that they would need help to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. They reached out to old contacts and forged new alliances, a rebellious faction within Mizar's own Rakari Empire, and a hidden network of human rebels who rejected Earth's tyranny, each group with their own reasons for wanting to see Earth's leaders fall. The hunt was on. With their allies by their side, Mizar and Greg plunged deeper into uncharted space, their ship loaded with alien artifacts and secret knowledge. They didn't know what dangers lay ahead or what ancient powers they would awaken, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The ruins of the progenitor outpost loomed before them, a twisted mass of alien architecture jutting from the swirling gases of the Labyrinth Nebula. Greg's hands tightened on the controls as he guided their ship through the maze of debris and energy fields. "We're running out of time," Mizar said, his eyes fixed on the sensor readouts. "Krell's ships are gaining on us." Dr. Novak hunched over the artifact, her fingers dancing across its glowing surface. "The wormhole network is becoming unstable. If we don't reach the weapon soon, we might lose our chance forever." As if in response to her words, a violent shudder rocked the ship. Alarms blared as a barrage of weapons fire erupted from behind them. "Krell!" Greg growled, throwing the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers. "Mizar, get on those guns!" The Rakari warrior sprang into action, sliding into the gunner's seat and returning fire. The space around them lit up with explosions and energy beams as the two ships engaged in a deadly dance. "We can't outrun them forever," Mizar shouted over the din of battle. "We need to lose them in the nebula." Greg nodded, his heart made. He pushed the ship's engines to their limits, plunging deeper into the roiling clouds of gas and dust. The sensors flickered and died as they entered a region of intense electromagnetic interference. "We're flying blind," Greg muttered, relying on instinct and the faint glow of the artifact to guide them. Suddenly, a massive structure materialized before them. An ancient space station, its surface etched with the same intricate patterns as the artifact. Greg barely managed to avoid a collision, bringing the ship to a shuddering halt mere meters from the station's surface. "This is it," Dr. Novak breathed, her eyes wide with awe. "The weapon must be inside." As they prepared to dock with the station, a transmission crackled through their comms. A familiar voice, distorted by static, filled the cabin. "Greg, Mizar, can you hear me?" It was Jace Xander, the young hacker from Earth. "I've got critical information about Colonel Ryder and the Voidbringers. You need to hear this before you go in there." Greg and Mizar exchanged glances, the weight of countless worlds pressing down upon them. Whatever lay ahead, they knew that the true battle for the fate of the galactic realm was only just beginning. The ancient progenitor station vanished in a blinding flash, leaving Greg and Mizar tumbling through the void. Their ship, battered and leaking atmosphere, spun wildly as it plummeted towards an unknown planet below. "Brace for impact!" Greg shouted, gripping the controls with white knuckles. The ship slammed into dense jungle canopy, metal screaming as branches tore through the hull. They came to a jarring halt, suspended in a tangle of alien vines. Mizar pried open the emergency hatch, coughing as acrid smoke billowed out. "We're alive," he rasped, helping Greg and Dr. Novak from the wreckage. They found themselves in a world of vibrant blues and purples, with towering fungal growths instead of trees. The air was thick and humid, filled with the chittering of unseen creatures. "Where are we?" Dr. Novak asked, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. Before anyone could answer, a familiar beeping cut through the alien sounds. Greg fumbled for his communicator, shocked to find it still functional. "Greg? Mizar? Can you hear me?" Jace's voice crackled through, imbued with panic. "Jace, what's going on?" No time to explain. The hegemony, they've taken over. Ryder was working with them all along. They're coming for you, for all of us. The transmission dissolved into static as a distant roar filled the sky. Greg looked up to see a sleek Rakari ship cutting through the atmosphere, plasma cannons blazing as it engaged pursuing Earth vessels. "That's Commander Saran's insignia," Mizar said, a note of hope in his voice. She must have picked up our distress beacon. The firefight raged overhead as Saran's ship swooped low, deploying grappling lines. Greg and Mizar worked quickly to secure themselves and Dr. Novak. "Hold on!" Mizar shouted as they were yanked skyward, alien vegetation whipping past them. They barely cleared the treetops when a hegemony cruiser appeared, disgorging a swarm of fighters. Leading the charge was a battered ship Greg recognized all too well. "Krell," he growled. "He just doesn't know when to quit." Saren's voice crackled over their comms. "Prepare for immediate wormhole jump. This is going to get rough." The Rakari ship's engines flared brilliant blue as it tore a hole in space-time. Greg's stomach lurched as they plunged through, the battle fading behind them in a burst of impossible colors. They emerged in a debris field on the edge of the Labyrinth Nebula. Saran's face appeared on a view screen, her expression grim. "Welcome aboard," she said. "I wish our reunion was under better circumstances, old friend." Mizar nodded. "What's the situation?" "Dire," Saran replied. "The hegemony has Earth in an iron grip. They're hunting down anyone associated with your mission. But your transmission, it sparked something. Colonies are rising up, demanding answers." Greg's mind raced. "We need to rally them, unite the resistance." Dr. Novak spoke up, her eyes gleaming with persistence. "And we need to finish decoding the progenitor message. The weapon is the key to ending this, once and for all." A proximity alarm blared. Krell's ship emerged from the wormhole, battered but still deadly. "He's persistent, I'll give him that," Mizar growled, moving to the weapons station. Greg took the helm, his hands steady on the controls. "Then let's show him what happens when he picks a fight with the wrong humans." And Rakari. As Krell's ship opened fire, Greg sent their vessel diving into the swirling clouds of the nebula. The battle for the future of the galaxy had only just begun. As Greg guided their vessel through the swirling clouds of the Labyrinth Nebula, a message crackled through the ship's communication system. The static cleared, revealing a face Greg had never seen before. "This is Captain Marcus Drake of the Dauntless," the man said, his voice rough but steady. "We picked up your transmission. The Dauntless stands ready to join your fight against the hegemony." Greg exchanged a glance with Mizar. "How do we know we can trust you?" Drake's lips curved into a wry smile. "Because we're all dead if we don't stand together. My crew and I have seen firsthand what the hegemony does to those who resist. We're done being guns for hire. It's time to pick a side." Before Greg could respond, another transmission cut through. This one was unlike anything he had ever seen. A being of pure energy, its form constantly shifting and flowing. "I am Zeno of the Celestii," the being said, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "Your struggle against the Voidbringers threatens not just this universe, but all realities. I offer you the knowledge of the Celestii, including the true nature of the progenitors and their weapon. In return, you must pledge to defend all life from annihilation." Dr. Novak leaned forward, her eyes wide with wonder. "The Celestii? I thought they were just a myth." As Greg processed this new information, a familiar ship emerged from the nebula's swirling gases. His hand tightened on the controls, ready for another battle with Krell. But the expected attack never came. Instead, Krell's face appeared on the monitor, his expression grim but determined. "I've seen the truth of the hegemony's depravity," Krell said, his voice heavy with regret. "I was blind before, but no longer. I and my loyal warriors offer our allegiance to your cause, Greg. Let me redeem myself by helping to defeat our common enemy." Greg's mind raced, weighing the sudden influx of allies against the threat they still faced. He opened his mouth to respond when alarms blared throughout the ship. "Multiple hegemony vessels inbound," Mizar reported, his fingers flying over the tactical display. "They're targeting civilian populations in nearby systems." On the main view screen, a face appeared. A man with cold, calculating eyes and a cruel smirk. "This is Overseer Zarin Malkin of the Hegemony," he announced. "Surrender now or watch as we crush every world that dares to support your pathetic rebellion." Greg's lips pursed as he saw the Hegemony ships opening fire on defenseless colonies. He turned to his newly expanded team, Mizar, Dr. Novak, Commander Saran, and now Drake, Zeno, and even Krell. "We need to stop those attacks and free the people they've imprisoned," Greg said, his voice firm. "Toran, you know their defenses. Can you get us into that prison colony?" The defected Rakari soldier nodded, drive etched on his face. "I can get us in, but it won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Greg replied. He looked at each of his allies in turn. "This is our chance to strike back, to show the galaxy that the hegemony can be defeated. Are you with me?" The response was unanimous. As one, they turned their ships toward the embattled colonies, ready to take the fight to the hegemony and uncover the true power of the progenitor weapon. As they approached the prison colony, cloaked in the shadow of a gas giant, Greg couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would change everything. The true nature of the cosmos and humanity's place in it was about to be revealed. The prison colony loomed before them, a massive structure of twisted metal and force fields floating in the shadow of the gas giant. Greg's hands tightened on the controls as he guided their ship through a narrow gap in the planet's swirling rings. "Toran, you're up," he said, glancing at the defected Rakari soldier. Toran nodded, his fingers dancing across the console. "Transmitting security codes now. Let's hope they haven't changed them since I defected." For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the force field flickered and died, revealing a docking bay. "We're in," Mizar growled, already moving towards the airlock. "Let's make this quick." As they prepared to board the prison, Dr. Novak approached Greg, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "I've made a breakthrough with the progenitor artifacts," she whispered. "I think I know where to find the weapon." Before Greg could respond, Captain Drake's voice crackled over the comms. "Multiple hegemony ships incoming. Whatever you're planning, do it fast." Greg nodded to Dr. Novak. "We'll discuss this once we're clear. For now, let's free these prisoners and get out of here." They moved swiftly through the prison's corridors, Toran's inside knowledge proving invaluable as they avoided patrols and disabled security systems. As they reached the main cell block, the scale of the hegemony's cruelty became apparent. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were crammed into tiny cells, their bodies wasted and spirits broken. "By the void," Mizar breathed, his hand tightening on his weapon. Greg activated the cell release, and chaos erupted as prisoners poured out. "We need to get these people to the escape pods," he shouted over the din. As they worked to evacuate the prisoners, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. Jace Xander, the young hacker from Earth. His clothes were tattered, and his face was gaunt, but his eyes burned with commitment. "Greg, Mizar," he called out, pushing through the throng. "You got my message." "Jace," Greg said, shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Long story," Jace replied, already moving to a nearby terminal. "But I've got something you need to see." His fingers flew over the keys, and suddenly the prison's main view screen lit up with a star map. "I intercepted hegemony transmissions," Jace explained. "They're mobilizing a massive fleet, heading for something called the Etherian Expanse." Dr. Novak gasped. "That's it. That's where the weapon must be." A violent tremor shook the station, nearly knocking them off their feet. Captain Drake's voice cut through the chaos. "Hegemony ships are here. We need to go now." As they raced back to their ship, Greg's mind raced. The weapon, the Etherian Expanse, the hegemony fleet, it all pointed to a confrontation that would decide the hope of the universe. They barely made it back to their vessels as the first hegemony troops breached the prison. As they rocketed away from the station, Greg saw the faces of the freed prisoners pressed against the windows of their escape pods, silently thanking their rescuers. Once they were clear, Greg opened a channel to his assembled allies. "We have a lead on the weapon," he announced, "but we'll be racing the hegemony to get there." "Where are we headed?" Commander Saran asked, her ship falling into formation alongside theirs. Greg took a deep breath, feeling the weight of countless lives on his shoulders. "The Etherian Expanse," he replied, "to the edge of known space and beyond." As their small fleet prepared to jump to light speed, Greg couldn't shake the feeling that they were hurtling towards a confrontation that would change the very fabric of reality itself. The journey through the Etherian Expanse stretched Greg's perception of reality to its limits. Swirling vortexes of energy pulsed with colors he couldn't name, while impossible geometric shapes hung suspended in the void. Their small fleet navigated carefully through the chaos, following coordinates deciphered from the progenitor artifacts. At last, they emerged into a vast chamber that seemed to exist outside of normal space-time. At its center floated an intricate crystalline structure, pulsing with otherworldly power. The weapon, Dr. Novak breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Before they could act, a familiar ship dropped out of hyperspace behind them, Krell's vessel now bearing the scars of countless battles. "Greg!" Krell's voice crackled over the comm. "You must not activate that device. Novak isn't who you think she is." Greg's hand hovered over the controls, doubt creeping into his mind. But it was too late. Dr. Novak's form shimmered and distorted, revealing a being of pure energy. "Fools!" she sneered, her voice echoing with cosmic power. "You've led me right to it." The transformed Arya Novak reached out, tendrils of energy connecting her to the ancient weapon. Reality itself seemed to bend around her. "By the void!" Mazar growled, raising his weapon. Before anyone could react, a massive tear opened in the fabric of space. Through it poured an armada of nightmarish ships, their hulls writhing with impossible geometries. "Voidbringers," Commander Saran whispered, her voice tight with fear. The chamber erupted into chaos. Energy beams lanced between ships as the three factions collided. Greg's hands flew over the controls, narrowly avoiding a blast that disintegrated an asteroid behind them. "Mazar, we need to get to that weapon!" Greg shouted over the din of battle. They fought their way through the melee, reality warping around them as the weapon's power was unleashed. Entire sections of space twisted and folded, swallowing ships whole. Suddenly, a familiar vessel appeared alongside them. Tarivel's ship, now twisted and corrupted by Voidbringer influence. "Mizar," her voice rasped over the comm, barely recognizable. "Join us! Embrace the void!" Greg saw the pain etched on Mizar's face as he targeted his former lover's ship. "I'm sorry," Mizar whispered, firing. As Tarivel's ship erupted into flames, a transmission cut through the chaos. Jace's face appeared on the monitor, his expression triumphant despite his haggard appearance. "Greg, I've done it. I've broadcast the truth about the hegemony to every corner of the galaxy. Their own people are turning against them." The tide of battle began to shift. Hegemony ships hesitated, their crews in disarray as the lies they'd been fed unraveled. Taking advantage of the confusion, Greg and Captain Drake managed to dock with the station housing the weapon. As they raced through twisting corridors, Greg's mind reeled from the impossible geometries surrounding them. They burst into the central chamber just as a being of pure light materialized before them. Her form crackled with almost unchecked energy, reality itself bending around her. "I am Therazul," she intoned, her voice resonating on a frequency that made Greg's bones ache. "You cannot comprehend the power you meddle with, humans. Stand aside or be unmade." Greg's hand tightened on his weapon, knowing it would be useless against such a being, but before he could act, the weapon pulsed with blinding light. Greg felt cosmic energy surging through him, threatening to tear him apart. With a cry of agony and perseverance, he channeled it outward. A shockwave of pure creation energy exploded outward, slamming into Therazul and her Voidbringer forces. The chamber shook violently as reality itself began to unravel. "Greg!" Mizar's voice cut through the chaos. "The realm is collapsing. We have to go." Through blurred vision, Greg saw Mizar at the controls of the weapon, energy crackling around him. With a final, pained look at his friend, Mizar activated the device. A rift tore open in space, and Greg felt himself being pulled toward it. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Mizar's smile as the chamber collapsed around them. Greg's eyes snapped open, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he found himself lying on cold metal decking. The familiar hum of a starship's engines vibrated beneath him. He blinked, trying to clear the after images of swirling cosmic energies from his vision. "Easy there," a gruff voice said. Captain Drake's weathered face swam into view. "You've been out for days." Greg sat up slowly, wincing at the ache that seemed to permeate every cell of his body. Mizar? He asked, his voice hoarse. Drake's expression darkened. Gone. Along with the weapon and that entire pocket of reality. Your friend bought us the chance to escape, but at a hell of a cost. The weight of Mizar's sacrifice settled over Greg like a lead blanket. He pushed himself to his feet, steadying himself against a bulkhead. What's our situation? Complicated, Drake replied. The hegemony's in chaos. Jace's broadcast did its job. Entire sectors are in open revolt. But now we've got a power vacuum and everyone's scrambling to fill it. As if on cue, raised voices echoed from the ship's bridge. Greg recognized Commander Saran's clipped tones, arguing with someone he couldn't quite place. We should strike now, Saran insisted. The hegemony is weak. We can crush them once and for all. And become the very monsters we fought against? The other voice belonged to Jace, Greg realized with surprise. We have a chance to build something better. Greg stepped onto the bridge, and the argument died away. He saw the toll of recent events etched on every face. Saran's teeth gritted with impossibly strong fury. Jace's eyes haunted despite his defiant stance. Toran, the Rakari soldier, stood off to the side, watching the proceedings with wary alertness. Before Greg could speak, a proximity alarm blared. On the main view screen, a sleek vessel of unmistakably alien design shimmered into existence. Celestii, Toran growled, his hand moving to his weapon. A transmission crackled to life, and a being of otherworldly beauty appeared on the screen. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and her eyes held the depth of galaxies. I am Virkal, emissary of the Celestii Conclave, she intoned, her voice resonating with subtle harmonics. We have observed your recent exploits. The Conclave demands an accounting of your actions and the surrender of all progenitor technology in your possession. Greg stepped forward, keenly aware of the expectant gazes of his crew. With all due respect, emissary, he said, choosing his words carefully, we've just freed half the galaxy from tyranny. We're not about to hand over the means to protect that freedom. Virkal's eyes narrowed. You toy with forces beyond your comprehension, human. The weapon you unleashed nearly tore reality asunder. Submit to our guidance or face the consequences. The transmission cut off abruptly. Greg turned to his assembled allies, seeing a mix of commitment and uncertainty on their faces. Well, Drake said with a wry grin, I'd say that complicates things. Greg nodded, his mind racing. We need a plan and information. He turned to Jace. Any luck decrypting those progenitor data caches we found? Jace's eyes lit up. Actually, yes. There's something... Well, you're going to want to see this yourself. As Jace called up holographic star charts, Greg felt the familiar thrill of discovery, warring with the weight of responsibility. Whatever came next would shape the fate of humanity and countless other species across the galaxy. He only hoped they were ready for the challenges ahead. The holographic star charts flickered to life, revealing a complex network of glowing pathways and celestial bodies. At the center pulsed a brilliant point of light. That, Jace said, gesturing to the radiant nexus, is the heart of progenitor space. Greg leaned in, his eyes tracing the intricate web of connections. And you're sure about this? Jace nodded. The data caches were clear, but there's more. He tapped a series of commands and the image zoomed in on a particular sector. This outpost, it's some kind of testing ground. The progenitors left it behind as a trial, I guess, for species they deemed worthy. Before Greg could respond, a new presence materialized on the bridge. A being of swirling light and energy coalesced into a vaguely humanoid form. You have done well to come this far, humans, the entity said, its voice resonating on multiple frequencies. I am Zeltha, guardian of the progenitor legacy. Greg instinctively reached for his weapon, but Captain Drake put a steadying hand on his arm. What do you want from us? Greg asked. Zeltha's form shimmered. To determine if humanity is ready to inherit the mantle of the progenitors. You must undergo a series of trials to prove your worth. The bridge erupted into a cacophony of voices, but Greg raised a hand for silence. He was about to respond when an urgent transmission cut through the chaos. Commander Saran's face appeared on the main view screen, her features contorted with desperation. "Greg, we're under attack! Krell's mercenaries!" The image dissolved into static before reforming. "Overwhelmed. Heavy casualties. Need you now." The transmission cut out. Greg's mind raced, weighing the monumental choice before him. The legacy of the progenitors, perhaps humanity's best hope for lasting peace, against the immediate threat to his allies and countless innocent lives. "Zeltha," Greg said, his voice tight with grit, "I can't abandon my people, but I won't turn away from this opportunity either." He turned to his crew. "Jace, Commander Torin, you'll stay here and continue the trials. The rest of us are going back." "An interesting choice," Zeltha mused. "Perhaps there is wisdom in it." Greg nodded to Captain Drake. "Plot a course back to the rebel stronghold. We'll need to punch through Krell's blockade." As the crew scrambled to their stations, a new figure stepped onto the bridge, a Celestii, his form shimmering with almost unchecked energy. "I am Zeno," the being said. "I will guide you through the perils that lie ahead." With Zeno's aid, they executed a daring slipstream jump, emerging in the heart of the battle. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos and destruction. Rebel ships fought desperately against an overwhelming mercenary fleet, while the planet's surface was scarred with the fires of orbital bombardment. Greg's ship barely touched down before he was racing towards the command center, flanked by Drake and Zeno. They found Commander Saran coordinating a desperate defense, her face streaked with grime and dedication. "You came," she said, relief evident in her voice. Greg surveyed the tactical displays. "We're here now. Let's turn this around." Under Greg's leadership, the tide of battle began to shift. Rebel forces rallied, executing bold maneuvers that caught Krell's mercenaries off guard. But the enemy's superior numbers threatened to overwhelm them at every turn. As Greg directed the defense from a forward command post, a familiar ship descended through the atmosphere. The Celestii emissary Virakal stepped out, her eyes blazing with newfound purpose. "Your actions have proven more worthy than I anticipated," she said, presenting Greg with a sleek Celestii weapon. "Perhaps humanity does have a role to play in shaping the galaxy's future." With Virakal's advanced technology bolstering their defenses, the rebels finally gained the upper hand. Greg led a strike team to the heart of the mercenary lines, cutting through their forces with surgical precision. And there, amid the chaos of battle, Greg came face to face with Zoran Krell. The mercenary leader's cybernetic enhancements gleamed in the harsh light of energy weapons. "It always comes down to this, doesn't it?" Krell sneered, raising his fists. The two men clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle, years of history fueling every punch and counterstrike. Greg fought with everything he had, driven by the knowledge of how much was at stake. With a final decisive blow, Greg sent Krell crashing to the ground. He stood over his fallen enemy, weapon raised, but couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. "It's over, Krell," Greg said, lowering his gun. "You've lost." As Krell was taken into custody, a cry of victory went up from the rebel lines. But their celebration was short-lived. The sky tore open, revealing a nightmarish fleet of Voidbringer vessels. At their center loomed a massive ship that crackled with impossible energies. A familiar voice boomed across all channels. "Did you think you could so easily cast me aside?" Tharazul's words dripped with cosmic malevolence. "I have returned to claim what is rightfully mine." Rebel and mercenary ships alike were obliterated by the Voidbringer's weapons. As Greg watched in horror, his communicator crackled to life. "Greg!" Jace's voice cut through the din of battle. "We've done it! We've unlocked the progenitor legacy. But you need to get back here now to complete the final trial." Greg looked from the devastation around him to the clear sky above, knowing the hope of the universe hung in the balance of his next decision. Greg's mind reeled as he processed Jace's urgent message. The final trial awaited, but the immediate threat of Tharazul's invasion loomed large. Time seemed to slow as he made his decision. "I'm sorry," he said to Commander Saran, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "But this might be our only chance." Before anyone could react, Greg activated his emergency transponder. A blinding flash engulfed him, and he found himself back aboard the ship with Jace and Toran. "We don't have much time," Jace said, leading Greg to a pulsing arch of energy. "Step through, the final trial awaits." Greg hesitated for a split second, then strode forward. As he passed through the arch, knowledge flooded his consciousness. The secrets of the progenitors, the very fabric of the cosmos, all became clear in an instant. When he emerged, he was transformed. Energy crackled around his form, and his eyes glowed with otherworldly power. He turned to Jace, his voice resonating on multiple frequencies. "I understand now," Greg said. "Take us back." In the blink of an eye, they were amid the raging battle once more. Voidbringer ships tore through the rebel fleet, their weapons carving swaths of destruction. Tharazul's massive vessel loomed above, a testament to her twisted power. Greg rose into the air, cosmic energy swirling around him. Across the battlefield, all eyes turned to witness his ascension. Rebel soldiers gaped in awe, while Voidbringer troops recoiled in fear. Tharazul's laughter echoed across the comm channels. "At last, a worthy opponent!" Her ship's main cannons swiveled towards Greg, charging with reality-warping energy. The beam lanced out, powerful enough to shred the fabric of space-time. Greg raised a hand, and the destructive force dissipated harmlessly around him. With a thought, he reached out and crushed a dozen Voidbringer ships, their hulls crumpling like paper. Rebel cheers turned to screams of terror as the laws of physics began to break down around them. Singularities spawned and swallowed entire squadrons. Pockets of distorted space-time trapped ships in temporal bubbles. On the bridge of the Rebel command ship, Jace convulsed as his cybernetic implants overloaded. "Too much power," he gasped, fingers flying over his console. "Downloading failsafe, just in case." Greg and Tharazul clashed in a maelstrom of cosmic forces. Their battle reshaped the very nature of reality around them. Planets cracked, stars flickered, and the void between dimensions yawned wide. "Greg!" Commander Saran's voice cut through the chaos. "You're destroying everything. Please, stop this madness." For a moment, Greg faltered. In that instant of distraction, Tharazul struck. Her essence plunged into Greg's being, corrupting the progenitor power that flowed through him. Their minds and bodies began to merge, spawning horrific abominations that defied comprehension. Greg screamed, his form warping and twisting. Tendrils of void energy lashed out, obliterating everything they touched. The universe itself seemed to tremble on the brink of annihilation. Virakal's voice rang out, a clarion call to the remaining Celestii. "Now, brothers and sisters, before all is lost." The air hummed with power as the Celestii wardens enacted their ancient rite. A tear in reality formed, revealing the utter emptiness of the void between dimensions. With a final surge of effort, they forced the merged forms of Greg and Tharazul through the rift. As the cosmic gateway slammed shut, a shockwave of unimaginable force exploded outward. Ships disintegrated, planets shattered, and the intricate web of galactic civilization collapsed in an instant. In the deafening silence that followed, a lone figure stirred within the obsidian outpost. Jace Xander opened his eyes, his body and mind forever changed by the cosmic crucible he had endured. Outside, Commander Saran and a handful of survivors gathered, their faces haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. As Jace emerged to meet them, the weight of their new reality settled upon them all. The age of cosmic empires had ended. Now, amid the ashes of a fallen universe, they faced an uncertain future as guardians of a fading legacy.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.